Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Julie Roche from DPIRD. I am one of the two team leaders in field research. I cover the area in Northam and Meriden and with the teams. This is my first, so bear with me. So I've been with the department for 25 years, come through with Agriculture WA, then Department of Agriculture and Food. From a farming background, not as good as I can say with Steve, but anyway, that's okay. Okay, so we're going to look at the trial site selections and going on from Andrew. It's all about your trial site selection. In the perfect world, you would hope that you would try and have a site selection done the year before going into the new, like now for going into 2023. Uniformity and tram lines, you would look at all of the dot points they have there. The weeds, you would like to have a look at the weed seed set, the soil condition, how easy access it is to the site, these sort of things. Oh, you can see on the picture that's put there. I'm not sure, it's one of Steve's areas, I think, and how quite uniform it is. There's a couple of sections there, but the access to the site is one of the better. What you need closest to you've got trucks and seed machinery, all of those things you've got to take into consideration when you are trying to assess what you're going to do. In a not so perfect world, perhaps Google Maps is not a good means of selecting a field research site. Possibly you could use that maybe for knowing what the soil is about, but it's only one tool that can help you. If you've found a particular site, doesn't hurt to do some soil sampling. It will tell you whether it's non-wetting, wetting, but gives you a rough idea, but definitely need to be visiting the site and not just trying to select from one of the tools that you have. But of course, we're not in the perfect world, so all of that. Yeah. Next one, on to my next slide. What sort of things need to be investigated? And within Andrew's talk, there's many things, general description of the trial. Is it a variety comparison? Is it an agronomy trial? Is it a nutritional trial? Time of sowing, early? Is it a herbicide efficacy trial? Tillage research? Is it a year trial, or is it a long-term trial over a year? 3 years. A lot of them can be long-term trials these days, and that will also give you an idea. You know, like when you're trying to have a location for a trial site. That will determine your location when you are looking. Next, your soil type and how you would be required to take soil samples to make sure that you've got what you're looking for within the soil, whether it's it's as I discussed, non-wetting, drainage, whether it can be waterlogged, the structure of the soil and penetration for your machinery, whether it's acidic, alkaline, the fertility of the soil, Yeah, lots to consider when you're actually picking your site, but when you are choosing your site, best to have a visit and considering all of those. Okay, so your rotation is another area where that you have to consider when you're choosing your site, and the length of rotation. So you may want a continuous wheat, you may want a continuous cereal after canola. So do you want a clean site after a legume, nitrogen, depending on what sort of trial you want to put in is what rotation that you will decide to have. Most of our trial sites that we have, we're trying to find something that is very even, some more often than after a canola, but as we say, you know, like different trials, different requirements. Site uniformity. This particular picture here is a site that we used in York, off the Spencer's Brook Road. It was a really good site. It was it was uniform, and as Andrew spoke with his replications and statistics, it was good for that. The site access was fantastic. It was a farmer's paddock. It was close to where we were. Just everything seemed to suit once that site had been picked. There was a little bit of variation in soil, but we didn't have that many issues with that particular site. Another one is with your weeds. Chipping and hand weeding, not a preferred control option. When you're looking for a site, they can be present, they may not be present. Soil samples can give you a seed bank, so perhaps best across the location that you're trying. Is there a herbicide? Is there resistance, weed resistance? Generally, if you're doing a farmer property, the farmer will probably have information for you so that you can look into that information, but it's still something that you need to look at yourself. Long-term trials, we have to go back and look at the weed control through what they've done. Gaps between plots can also give you a weed source, which you don't want, but they can be controlled also. Another look at these is the vermin, which can be, if you're picking a site, say perhaps next to forest or any large vegetation, native areas, they can become your kangaroos and your birds, rabbits, and sometimes the feral pigs. Time of sowing is very much, they draw attention as they're early, most of them, and very green for the year. Fencing's not always going to stop them. And of course that can affect your results at the end of the day. On the lighter side, great photo, that's the field research team here at DPIRD. Some changes have happened, but that's some of the equipment behind. Biosecurity and access is very important. Any issues with pests and diseases is something that we like to put forward. Trial site location, all of those things with the farmer. how you're going to access, where you're going to access, how you are going to look at field days, field walks, and considerations for all of those access points for those during the year. Also for your own equipment, looking at your trucks and your trailers and your seeders, harvesters. Are the roads going to get you there? Are they not going to get you there? This particular site that we had at York was fantastic. It was near the road, great access. It had a side access road. And if we got into trouble, we had the airport on the other side, but we had dirt road accessibility for that as well. But those issues need to be looked at when you're actually picking that site. And thank you.
So Andrew and Julie have definitely discussed some of the quite critical factors around trial design and trial site selection that we all need to think about in terms of the trials and demonstrations that we utilise within our groups. So Andrew covered some quite important stuff, and he was quite upfront about the takeaway messages. Design is quite important, and it involves some careful planning. And a plug for himself that biometricians would be quite a useful thing when we're doing some early planning. And that poor design results in treatments that are not really comparable, and they can't be easily fixed or can't be fixed when we use analysis at the end of the day, and also can lead to some incredibly wrong conclusions about trials. That replication is the strong point from Andrew's talk, and that a minimum of 2 reps, 3 treatments is the bare minimum going forward, and that is to ensure we get a good degree of confidence in the results that we're seeing. Takeaways. There's always variation and error, and if we can do as much as we can do to reduce those opportunities for error and variation, better off we will be. Good design, as I've said, includes the replication. A minimum of 2 reps is great. Julie covered quite a lot around site selection, and these are all things that we need to consider before we go and choose a site. So there's stuff around biosecurity, reducing the risk. So thinking about site location, ease of access, if there are any known risks, disease, vermin, etc. Ideally not placing your trial sites near bush in particular. We've all experienced the joy of trial sites that have been nibbled on by kangaroos and ducks and parrots. Weeds, depending on what your trial actually is, as to some of the core things that you might need. So weeds, I mean, if you're a herbicide tolerant trial, you probably do need weeds to be present in the trial sites that you select. And there is no fun in chipping or hand weeding large trial sites over time. Soil sampling is quite important. That gives you a heads up on uniformity. It gives you a heads up on whether you're going to be facing things like non-wetting, acidity issues, alkaline soil, potential issues with structure and fertility. Rotation, it's good to have an understanding of what rotation has been included in the paddock so far and what is planned to go forward, and that some of your trial sites will have some critical factors about, they will need to be on a cereal crop as your previous crop or a fallow. So it's quite important to have an understanding of what your rotations are, and that's, trying to find a site that is uniform or as uniform as possible to reduce some of those risks and errors going forward is good. and that it's always good to have a conversation with the farmer whose site the trial is on about some of these issues, so you can get some of the history and you can choose the best site possible. I hope I summarised that well.
Getting the nod from the two. Excellent. Dive in, Veronica.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with both Julie and Andrew in their discussions. I suppose I want your opinion, if you've experienced what many of the grower groups have, is that in an ideal world, you do a lot of those things, but you can't necessarily, if there's been a tight funding turnaround and you've suddenly found out that, oh yes, you've got a go ahead, or they're looking for a new site to do something, so you haven't had the sufficient time to maybe look at that previous history on paddocks that you would like to. So have you ever had an experience where, you know, you don't get more than a couple of months to find a site, and you know how you would actually go about addressing, you know, other than just using the grower's knowledge on paddocks, you know, finding the ideal sites?
Can I answer that one?
I'll let you answer that one. You've got a bit more on that than me.
Yeah, look, as Julie mentioned, in the perfect world, you'd pick them all early, but we're quite aware of funding processes, and you more than likely the normal is that you'll start to get told at this time of year what trials you might be having. So yeah, you're picking trials now. Yes, you have to rely a lot on what the farmer says. Sometimes, or mostly, they get that right, but you just have to be very diligent in your you know, and looking at the site as closely as you can, you know, with that soil sampling and various things like that, and rely on their information. But that is more than normal, that you're picking them not long before you need to start the trial because of those funding ways that happens. But you just can't make a good trial out of a bad site, is what I think we're trying to get across. So, you know, Andrew can do as much as he can with the stats, but if the trial site's bad, then you just can't make a good trial out of it. So if you're not happy with the site that you're being offered, you need to be strong and just walk away from it, look for another site. You know, you're just not going to get the result that you want if it's a bad site.
Yeah, thank you. I think, you know, we do our best, but sometimes it just gets a bit tricky when you've got tight time frames. So thanks, Steve.
Thanks, everyone.